People who deride slippery slope arguments are typically trying to convince others that someone is spouting an extreme hypothetical case that will not in fact occur. When it comes to current euthanasia legislation being proposed and introduced in Australia, I'm sad to say that we are not just on a slippery slope. It's more like we are on a theme park tower of terror, plunging from the heights of human dignity so rapidly that any potential protest is almost over before the ride starts. And if those of us who value life do not act now, we will all land with a gut-wrenching thump into a very hostile cultural reality. Euthanasia will always exploit suffering and extinguish life, and cast a long shadow on some who others deem as not having a quality of life. There is something simple that you can do, and I'm going to get to that shortly. Martin Luther King's grandmother once said to him, "Everybody is somebody. Always know that you count, that you have worth, and that your life has ultimate significance." And she was right. Everybody has inherent worth simply by being human. Your incalculable worth is not dependent on what you look like, how productive you are, how others view you, or even how you view yourself. Everybody is somebody. And yet, as a nation, we are being led to believe that some lives outlive their worth. In fact, one of the chief architects of Australia's original assisted suicide legislation is urging lawmakers to allow access to euthanasia to under 18s and non-terminally ill patients, essentially euthanasia on request. The clear message being delivered to vulnerable people is, "I'm sorry, but we no longer think your life is worth living, and if you want, we can end it for you." But there's more. Australia's federal and state attorneys general are considering changes to federal legislation to allow patients to be assessed for assisted suicide via telehealth. A move to action over this dangerous proposal are 1,000 plus Australian healthcare professionals, men and women, who have dedicated their lives to the care of those with serious illness and who abide by the Hippocratic Oath that has guided physicians for 2,400 years, requiring them to do no harm under any circumstances. The oath states, "I will keep them from harm and injustice. I will neither give a deadly drug to anybody who asked for it, nor will I make a suggestion to this effect." So, because of the great hazards and the injustice that would result, these 1,000 plus men and women have written a joint letter urging the Attorneys General to retain the current prohibition on the use of phone, email and video conferencing for access to assisted suicide. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to let you know how you can support them in this. It's not hard to imagine what can go wrong with euthanasia via telehealth. Protections will be stripped away that currently protect vulnerable individuals who feel under duress to choose euthanasia, when what they really want is palliative care, aged care, mental health services, and especially in regional and remote Australia. It is surely a breach of patient rights to imagine a doctor can accurately assess competence, informed consent, lack of coercion, mental illness by telehealth, or that they can detect body language and whether palliative care needs are being met. Medical experts are already identifying the vulnerability of telehealth to cause errors, which obviously in this case would be fatal. Of course, it's in rural and remote areas where telehealth is seen as being of most assistance, the very same areas that are generally poorly resourced for palliative care. Which begs the question, how can we seriously consider euthanasia by telehealth without properly funding high-quality palliative care to rural areas? To do so surely creates a subtle government-sponsored coercion to end your life to avoid suffering that could be alleviated by palliative care resources. And this is a grave injustice, particularly in light of well-documented shortfalls in palliative care services funding and access. People suffering due to a lack of access to high-quality palliative care should never be the reason to legislate for euthanasia. Our focus should be on assuring every Australian of the ability to avail themselves of quality palliative care in the end phase of life, to have access to a supportive social network, and to be able to live every day until their last natural breath, regardless of their illness, age, culture, or location. Few of us are immune to the painful and yet profound journey to death of loved ones or friends. It's hard, but it's also an immense honour and privilege. I have helped care for 2 of my sisters who died relatively young from aggressive cancers. They received amazing palliative care, and I will forever be grateful. Pain and other symptoms can almost always be alleviated. In fact, they rarely come up as reasons for requesting assisted suicide. Instead, the top reasons are fear of being a burden and wanting to be in control. A teenager recently said to me, on the one hand, we're told how tragic suicide is and that there's always hope, and we're asked, are you okay? But more and more the answer that's getting through is that we are able to kill ourselves if that's really what we want, and someone will even help us do it. It makes no sense at all. And she's right. Relaxing criminal codes to facilitate assisted suicide by telehealth is completely counterintuitive to our national suicide prevention initiatives, particularly in rural Australia and amongst Indigenous people. The way we care for our dying is a significant indicator of the kind of society that we are. And despite all I've said, I know that many, even most of those I speak to who support assisted suicide, approach the argument from a place of compassion. However, viewing euthanasia as a compassionate response and increasing ease of access says to the terminally ill and even people with a disability, even if never spoken, it says, you've become a burden to yourself and to the rest of us. The right to die can so easily become a duty to die. The default switch is flipped. A society that accepts assisted suicide can no longer say that every life has inherent worth. People argue that we need assisted suicide laws to preserve people's dignity, but human dignity ultimately rests on the value of the person, and that is infinite. Life, whether it is burning fiercely or is at a low flicker, is still a divine flame which no one should extinguish, no matter how humane they believe their motives to be. Either life is sacred or it is of no account. It is inconceivable that it is one thing in some cases and in other cases something very different. So, what can you do? Please sign a letter to the Attorneys General calling on them to do 2 things. To not allow access to assisted suicide for under 18s and non-terminally ill patients, and also to retain current Commonwealth laws which prevent euthanasia by telehealth. You can find the letter on our ACL website, and the link will also be included below. Assisted suicide laws seriously undermine our perception of the dignity and value of human life in all its different stages and conditions. So choose life so that you and your children may live. God bless.